one-on-one shadow boxing, have your say. We are going to continue our discussion with Neil Windsor and his role as a whistleblower in WA.
I should, and I meant to do it earlier, fit it in earlier, because I might have lost some viewers because they're thinking, oh, this is rubbish, this guy's a nutcase. It's as simple as this. I make 2 points.
Yes.
I mentioned earlier that I spent, before I left the department, walked out of the department, feeling under the pump, I'd spent 3 or 4 years documenting my questions, my expressions of concern and advice, because that was my job. That was my belief that I had a legal obligation to do my job.
Yes.
I hadn't gone done the whistleblower thing of ripping straight off to the media. I'd been within the department for 3 years.
In-house,
yes,
you've done your job.
When I went outside the department and pointed to the authorities that I went to, I mentioned before, one by one, with all of them, right up to McCusker, you know, the police, the Corruption and Crime Commission, I pointed all of them to that record and said, the department has never, and I put it as clearly as this to the Premier of the day, the department has never addressed my claim by way of writing or discussion.
So that's, you've met with wall of silence.
So it was the simplicity of it is, or was, I thought, with all of these authorities, ask the department for evidence of them having addressed my claim. My second point was actually this. For 4 years, between 2000 and 2004, the department had been telling the Parliament that there were documents that the department had provided to me addressing my claim, in addition to the 4 years of advice to the Parliament. During the workers' comp hearing, which ran for about 18 days, and the department marshalled about 25 witnesses, was presided over by Michelle Pontifex. The person who was acting as advocate for me questioned the Director-General at that time, a guy called Mike Harris, about the advice to Parliament.
Yes.
Where are the documents? This is important because the man is on oath at the time, and he said, oh yes, there are documents, said it repeatedly. There are documents we provided, the department provided him addressing his claim. Now, in my mind, that is perjury. When when there's records in the Parliament as to the existence of documents, specific documents, and a person is questioned on that and said they exist, and they don't exist, because I'll jump forward. The one thing the Corruption and Crime Commission did for me that was good was to acknowledge there were no documents. It took me 8 years. 14th of August 2008, I got that acknowledgement. No documents.
But Neil, you got the documents which you submitted,
yes,
but no answer for
not
your
a dicky
document.
bird from the department.
No, so that was proven by the Crown Commission.
But
there's no documents or no answers you got.
Yeah. If I can go back to the beginning, but very briefly, just run through. As I said, I made a formal claim. I went to every authority in Western Australia, one by one, until I got to the police. 2.5 years the police were dealing with it. I was surprised that I got hold of the document, the recommendation, 1 page, recommendation for an investigation of official corruption, which was brought about by, I won't mention his name, but he was an honest detective, I believe. And that recommendation went up through the system. 2.5 years later, keep in mind, what I
Yes.
said before, the cornerstone of what I was giving to them, there was a lot of other information, evidence about fraud, abuse of office, falsification of records, but what my cornerstone was those 2 points I mentioned before, that they'd been telling the Parliament for 4 years there were documents, and they'd given evidence under oath that there were documents, and as found out through the Corruption and Crime Commission, there were no documents. So that's
very crucial element of the whole saga.
well, it's the morsel that they can't, of truth, that they can't get around, they can't get through, they can't get over, and it's so easy to grasp. And I took that to the police, and after 2.5 years, they said we see nothing. Regards the perjury,
Yes.
and this Mr. Harris, for example, and Stuart Hicks, he given evidence as to elaborate transparency, which you would imagine would have been documented in the,
Yes.
elaborate transparency in the relation to the introduction, privatisation, and contracting out, and these documents didn't exist. So the police said, "Oh, it was just Mr. Windsor's word against theirs."
Yes.
Yes, and I said, "But there's records of the Parliament and transcript court testimony. How can you say it's my word against theirs?"
Very good.
Then I found out through the press
Yes.
that Mr. Hicks and the other chap I mentioned now, the Western Australian Public Sector Commissioner, well, Hicks initially was contracted to the police during the period that I was being told that he was under criminal investigation. My documents are extensive on this point.
So he was contracted by the police.
The police
was?
at no stage said, "Look, the fellow you've said has been involved in corruption is actually working here."
Doing what? What was his...
Well, you remember the Kennedy Royal Commission?
Yes.
He was a consultant to the police
on the Royal Commission.
as to how to have procedures within the police service to avoid corruption, so you don't have corruption in the police service. He later was on the board of the police service, and
Neil, that's magical. I love it.
I tell no lies. Obviously, it's a matter of record that Mr. Wauchope and Mr. Hicks, both of whom were clearly identified in my claims of corruption,
Yes.
sat on the selection panel for our current police commissioner, Carlo Cano.
On the renewal or the original selection?
The original selection.
On the
Yes.
original selection.
Yes. When I was advised at the end of 2.5 years that the police had found nothing, no evidence of
Yes.
criminal conduct, and I found out that Hicks and Wauchope were,
Selecting the police commissioner.
there was a conflict of interest, I questioned repeatedly Commissioner O'Callaghan as to whether he could see there being a conflict of interest.
And he said?
Nothing. Couldn't get a response from him.
I see.
I got Clayton's responses from some of his people.
Yeah.
I had stand-up arguments with his right-hand inspector at the time. Very, very, very vigorous discussions.
But you'd still not have an answer.
Still, nothing. In fact, when he stood up in 2006 pontificating about good governance in policing, I tackled him again, got the same non-response. I moved on from the police to the Corruption and Crime Commission. I got short shift there in 2004, and I went to Malcolm McCusker as the parliamentary inspector. I was there for 2.5 years. Critically, in that period, in fact, the first meeting I had with him, I took my brother and a very good friend of almost 60 years, a chap by the name of Trevor Reeks. Man plays with a straight bat. We sat down with Malcolm McCusker and I laid out the documents. a lot of documents, as I said, to do with fraud, misappropriation, falsification of records, abuse of office and perjury.
Yep.
But to make it simple, it was those 2 points I mentioned before. Telling the Parliament documents existed, giving evidence to a court that documents existed, and I said, but they don't exist, Malcolm. I'm telling you now, they do not exist.
And they find out it don't exist.
Well, 2.5 years with Malcolm McCusker, he gave his report to the Corruption and Crime Commissioner, Len Robert Smith, in 14th of August 2008, and it was the only good thing that came out of Len Robert Smith's report was there are no documents.
That should be pleasing for you.
Well, it was as I said, the cornerstone of my
saga.
My current request to let me get on with my life. Bring this to an end and let me do the right thing by my family and move on.
Neil, last question. What's your message to wannabe whistleblowers?
Well, I'd like, if there are more, I should have quoted Max Trenorden, 9th of August 2011, said, the issue is, why has this matter involving, and this was in the Legislative Council, the issue involving Neil Windsor has not been dealt with. There is no excuse for this matter not to have been dealt with. I put to members directly that the number one reason this matter has not been dealt with is because the man blew the whistle on a range of prominent Western Australians and he deserves to be punished. That is why this matter has not been resolved and why it remains unresolved now. That was 9th of August 2011 and it remains unresolved today.
So what's your message?
My message is to anyone, even if it's outside of the public service, don't report wrongdoing if it involves people of high status. And if I'm to be further punished for what I've said here today, I hope you'll allow me to come back and explain that punishment and, hopefully sense will prevail at some stage.
Neil, thank you for being here today, and definitely if something is happening after this to you, you're welcome back to explain and to highlight for our audience what is really going on with the lives of whistleblowers in our state of Western Australia. Thank you again, Neil, and don't forget, next week, same time, same channel.
Thanks, Tibor.
One-on-one shadowboxing. Have your say.